Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is moving on. What does it mean to move on from our old stories and our old hurts and our old traumas and to allow them to fade into the past, not unresolved, but to clear them and let them go so that they don't need to define us any longer. So before we get started, it should be a fun conversation. Before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, and creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together and vigorously rub those palms together. Feel the friction, the temperature, the sensation, all of it, all the tickling and tingling, and allow all of that rich sensation to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, Rosalind. So good to have you here with us this morning. And welcome to everybody else who's joining us. Today, we're talking about moving on. So this came about yesterday from a couple situations, but talking to one person who had experienced some pretty intense trauma that has haunted them for a lifetime from the time they were 5. And it's manifested in a bunch of different ways. And we finally came to a point yesterday where we brought up the possibility of allowing that 5-year-old to mature, to grow up. And the trauma that this child had experienced was inadvertent trauma from a parent who just was inept as a parent, not malicious, just inept. But it frightened this very sensitive child. And all of those memories stuck and created all kinds of behavioral patterns and peripheral traumas. And so what we were able to explore yesterday was the evolution of that relationship and how that parent, when the child had grown into a teenager and a young person, how that parent actually was really supportive in so many ways and encouraging of independence and adventure and wonderful things. And the interesting, or one of the most interesting pieces of this whole story is that the memory of the child became the dominant memory, and it really had wiped out the recollection of the later years. And so in allowing that child to move on and allowing that child to grow up and leave behind these difficult experiences, particularly with an understanding that they emerge not from malice, but from ineptitude, there was a profound freedom and a reshaping of the experience and the trauma. And it opened up a whole new opportunity, because rather than a force who had been damaging and limiting, this same figure became a representation instead of expansion and exploration and discovery. And what a revelation, you know, what a beautiful transition to be able to get to the place where this little child could grow into a young adult, and then an adult, and bring forward all this matured perspective, you know, to bring that matured perspective forward into life, into the expression of life. So it made me think about how we hold on to certain situations to the exclusion of a bigger picture. And we don't allow ourselves, sometimes we don't allow ourselves the grace to move on, to just say, okay, I can allow that to be past. And another situation was just so brilliant as an example of someone who really did move on very effectively, was another person who, when we first started convening, had deeply pervasive fear throughout everything in their lives. And it was kind of the underlying current for everything. And we did this wonderful process, was wonderful session where we just replaced the operating system, because the operating system had a foundation of fear. And weeks after, just recently, just this week, in fact, we were talking about the fact that they were going through their old notes and discovered notes about that process, and they had forgotten that their life had been so riddled with fear. They had forgotten that their whole life was driven by it. It was gone. It was gone. And they didn't have to keep remembering it. So when we talk about remembering, think of the word remembering is like reassembling. And when we remember things, we tend to believe that what we remember is true, when what we remember is just snapshots at best. For most of us, I guess there are people who have photographic memories and who remember everything that ever happened to them. There are very few of them, but there are those people. And I don't know that I would trade with them. You know, I think that there is a grace in forgetting, or being able to move beyond certain experiences. However, and maybe there's grace in being able to move beyond certain identities even more. You know, to be able to create ourselves anew. I think that there's a blessing in that. So speaking of identities, Rosalind says, moving on from the sense of losing former self. what to do when it feels like a void, loss of identity. The nervous system hasn't felt this newness, how to replace the operating system when it wants to hold on to the known of former identity, dismantling and then putting together the pieces without the old stuff that is no longer serving the current self. So many things to talk about in what you've written there, Rosalind. So it's interesting to watch people going through transformation and fear in the face of becoming themselves anew, becoming a new expression of themselves. There's often fear, and then there is sometimes a sense of loss. There is sometimes a sense of disorientation because it's a new feeling or a new experience, and that it being in the unfamiliar, this is where we get to develop a new sense of comfort, a new sense of wholeness, maybe, is with identity. See, the thing about identity is it's actually quite fluid. It's not something that's fixed. And I think that the definition of identity for me that has served me better than anything is that who I am is life expressing itself through this unique vessel that I am, or that I provide. And so this unique vessel, then I get to be expressive of life, and life expresses in myriad forms. And I don't have to hold on to a specific expression of that identity. So we often identify ourselves with our job or with our relationship or with the place that we live or with our family or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when there's loss of a parent, it's a shift of identity that occurs because or when both parents are gone, there's a shift of identity. It's like, who am I now? And it's now that I am an orphan, that was in air quotes, but now that my parents are no longer here, we get to define ourselves over and over and over again. And the thing is that when we are an expression of life as an identity, then that has a continuity to it that can be really, really powerful. And so when we create a new identity, so I was talking about this person who really forgot that they had been afraid. They didn't have a loss of identity. They had a finding of identity, if anything, like they were able to better express themselves. They were more aligned with themselves. They were more present. They are more present to themselves. So it's an interesting thing, that's different from when there's a shock to the system, like when we lose someone dear, or when we lose a job, or when we move, or when we get a new job, or, there are circumstantial situations that we often misconstrue as identity, or that we attach to as identity when in fact they're not. And being able to move on, being able to move into the next expression is a gift, and it allows us to stop trying to walk forward while facing backward, which is what we do so much, right? We look at the past and try to walk backwards into the future, which is crazy. Instead of looking into the potential, we create things based on what has existed rather than creating something that is calling us forward into a new future. So when we talk about remembering, what we are doing, as you mentioned, Rosalind, is we're dismantling and then putting together the pieces, maybe leaving the old stuff. But the thing is, what if we face toward what's emerging? What if we are informed by what is emerging rather than by what is past? What if we can create ourselves and recreate ourselves in response to a calling, rather than a history? Because we don't have to be bound to our history. We could maybe be informed by it and yet not be bound by it, and not attached to it, not defined by it. And so moving on, it's possible. Like, I'm sure that if at some point it were useful for the person who forgot that they had been so fearful, if it became useful for them to remember that, to be acknowledging that, like I too had been profoundly fearful. Fear was my primary emotion. I remember recognizing that at one point, and it's no longer active. It's no longer a foundation for me. So knowing that it had been is valuable, in that I can know that I can go, that it's possible to live beyond it. So I know it's possible, so I can share that possibility with others, right? I've witnessed it, so I get to share that with others. It's not amnesia. It's just that the prevalence of that past experience fades. It's not relevant to my creation from this moment. It helped to shape me, perhaps, but it's not relevant for my moment-to-moment existence. So Rosalind says, and then the sense of timing, or when will that happen, arises. That has struck me with standing still maybe because I'm not noticing the progress. So that's such an important thing that you just mentioned about noticing the progress. And you may think you're standing still, but maybe you're integrating. Maybe you are maybe you're resting. Maybe you're gaining strength. I mean, there are all kinds of things that might be happening in the moment that looks like standing still. And so noticing the progress, marinating. Exactly. That's a possibility too, Rosalind. So I just want to mention, if you all are wanting to engage in the conversation, if you're putting in comments that I'm not responding, Hello, Jenny. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome. It's great to have you here with us this morning. You know, Jenny's saying I didn't get notification you were here. I have another friend who said that they're not getting notification anymore when I show up. So that's interesting. I don't know what that's about, but I'm glad you made it, Jenny. Welcome. Anyway, we're talking about moving on, like allowing the pain and suffering of the past to be past and not to be bringing it into our present in every given moment. And we were just talking about not noticing progress. And so here's the thing. I think that most people don't recognize progress. Most people believe that things are staying the same and they don't notice the nuance. So Jenny says, hello, I'm not emotionally well today. I wish I just stayed in the past because it's killing me now. So Jenny, I'm so sorry to hear that you're going through such a difficult time. And I'm going to venture to say this is where the moving on comes from. And it's not that it's easy. Rosalind says, me too. I found that if I have the Enlightened World Network Facebook page loaded, then Core Connection Live pops up. So that's interesting that nobody's getting notifications. I wonder what that's about. I'll see if I can check into that. I don't understand why. Anyway, as far as what happens is we reconstruct our past over and over and over. Jenny says, my dog has pancreatitis. Oh man, our furry friends, right? They are the light in so many lives. You know, my cat, my pets that I've had have been my best friends. Oh, and Rosalind says, I only see the Mira Rubin page pop up. That's so weird. I don't know why that is. Huh. Because when we set up the Restream, it goes to Enlightened World Network. I don't know what that is. Jenny, I totally understand. Gus is my best friend. Bernadette says no notification today. This is so weird, folks. I don't know what the deal is. I'm glad you showed up, Bernadette. Welcome. It's good to have you here. I'm glad you were able to catch us. We're talking about moving on. And Jenny, so here's the thing. I know that when our furry friends are not well or are dying at the worst, it's so incredibly painful because you feel helpless, because there's such a deep sense of loss and connection. And believe me, I know. And on the other side of that, we get to remember and appreciate how much they've given us, how generous they've been to share their lives with us. And I thank my cat regularly for being with me. You know, all my pets. I mean, you know, I think you probably know how devastating it was to lose Maggie. And on the other side of that sorrow is just such joy and love and appreciation to have experienced these wonderful beings in our lives. And so it is a deliberate choice. It is a deliberate choice to fall into our sadness or to actually falling into our sadness can happen just really easily. It's a deliberate choice to cultivate gratitude and appreciation and presence. Bernadette says, I saw someone you first started. I have a dear friend who lost her one and only son a few years ago. She periodically shows signs of guilt when she is happy. I don't know how to help her. Wow. So here's the thing. I've heard of people feeling like that if they give up their sorrow, they're giving up the memory, or they're not honoring the person who passed. And the thing is that really, truly, the way to honor the person or the being who passed is to be in appreciation and joyful memory of who they were, not to be mourning them in sadness, in crippling sadness. They wouldn't want you to stop your life. You know, I have a friend whose daughter died when she was 17, and they went through a very, very dark time. And then they have come to a place where they realize that their daughter would have wanted them to live life to the fullest and to be happy, and they are living their lives, like really joyfully living their lives in honor of their daughter. And that is a way that we can honor those who have passed, whether they be our furry friend beings and beautiful spirits, or people that we love, or people that have fallen out of our lives. So Jenny says, I also learned I have significant loss of bone density and at very high risk for bone fracture. I'm deteriorating since the estrangement with my daughter 2 years ago. I've been isolated and alone for 2 years. So Jenny, that's also, COVID didn't help you or anybody else. And I just encourage you to be cultivating other relationships and, reaching out. It's hard. I know when you're so depressed and isolated, very hard to reach out. But there are things like meetup groups where you can find people of like interests. And Bernadette says, I totally agree. It seems to be a vicious cycle of where she belongs. I'm so sad for your friend, Bernadette. But Jenny says, my daughter became estranged 1 year after she lost her 6-year-old son due to suffocating. Oh my God. Jenny, such devastation. And I'm imagining your daughter is just having a very, very, very hard time of her own, also going through her own darkness, and perhaps you might be able to find some forgiveness for her. What a heartbreak for all of you. I can't even imagine. And if you can find a way to be loving your grandson and appreciating the time that you had with him, and allowing yourself to cultivate new relationships, maybe even volunteering at a pet shelter or something might start to ease your heart. And Bernadette says, glad you're here, Jenny. Thank you for expressing yourself. I wish you grace, Jenny, truly. And with that, I need to go. I'm going to be out of town, so you're going to have replays for the rest of this week and Monday. And I look forward to seeing you on my return. And so much love to you. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live here generally each weekday morning at the Enlightened World Network Facebook page at 9 a.m. Eastern. And just so much love and light to you until we meet again.